And when you're ready, I don't know if you want to close those doors.
I
Yeah,
can.
yeah.
But don't start because I have to press the button.
Just thinking, just in case if it gets loud. I think you just press the button over there. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, that's turn it on.
All set. Thank you. All right. You ready?
Yeah. I'm ready.
You ready? All right, great. All right. All right, ready. Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. This is the City Council as a whole meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please do that? Roll call, please.
Council President Iglesias.
Present.
Councilwoman Anthony.
Present.
Majority Whip Castillo.
Present.
Councilman Correa.
Present.
Council President Pro Tempore Espino.
Present.
Councilman Gonzalez.
Present.
Deputy Majority Leader Harris is absent. Councilor Kerwin. Absent. Councilwoman LaFortune. Absent. Councilor Miller. Absent.
No, Councilwoman Miller's here. I see her.
Oh,
She's-
she's here?
Yep. Continue.
Councilwoman Miller.
She's,
Josh on there.
all right, just keep on rolling the roll call, then we'll get back to it.
Senior Deputy Majority Leader Narducci.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilor Salvatore. Absent. Majority Leader Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Vargas is absent. You have 10 present, 4 absent, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Majority Leader Taylor. All rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
I
of the United States of
United
America,
States of America.
for which
to
it
the
stands,
republic
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for
all.
all.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Madam Clerk, just the presentation discussions relative to the pension and working group report. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do we have the report?
Yes.
Okay, has the report been officially submit the report?
Yes.
So, Majority Leader Taylor, can we make a motion to officially submit the Providence Pension Working Group report dated January 2022 report? It's roughly 27 pages into the record. Have that motion, please.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Majority Leader Taylor.
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Majority Whip Castillo. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
And clerk, first item, please. Item 1.
Remarks from co-chairs of the pension working group. Council President John J. Iglesias.
Okay. Thank you. I'll begin. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, everybody, this evening. It's a very important evening. I want to thank everybody for attending, from legislators, of course, the mayor, his staff, the financial people, all council members, all stakeholders, and people who are listening. I said it before, I'll say it again, as we all know why we're here, city's pension system. My journey for the past over a quarter century here hasn't changed. When I first came on the council, the first thing I ever voted for was pension reform. And here we are again, still trying to deal with this serious conundrum. Numbers don't lie. Presently, the city's pension system is in a difficult state. As you know, it's 23% funded, which equates to about 300 to 400 million in the actual pension account, with a $1.2 billion unfunded liability. As you know, presently the city pays about $93 million every year I equate it to an analogy of a mortgage payment, right? It's it's a difficult mortgage payment. It's a mortgage payment that will grow exponentially every year by 5%, which eventually will become unworkable, unattainable, and more difficult for future mayors, future councils, and also the future of the state. Its ability to maintain a handle on its finances, pay its debt, and also try to provide the services the people of Providence deserve. My council colleagues who are leaving with me next term, we have an opportunity potentially. I'll ask you to keep your eyes, ears, open mind. We have an opportunity maybe to help mitigate this situation, right, with this proposal. Doesn't solve it. It's no magic bullet. It is a request. It's an ask. It's a permission from the State House, as you know, and what you'll be hearing about is a request for the State House to allow the city to issue a $500 million pension obligation bond, and for the city to take on that burden, and for the city to have be a 25-year bond. It'll be a fixed rate, which is new, and also the ability to refinance in 10 years from now. Now, that doesn't solve it, but it mitigates I mentioned the analogy of the bad mortgage payment, right? And it has the ability to lower that mortgage payment and stabilize it and make it more acceptable for finances for the next 25 years. Also, with proposals having financial governance added to it. A couple of pieces of courses which we talked about, which is we would maintain the mortgage payment we're doing now today for the certain amount of years. So basically, and the idea when they tell you to pay an extra mortgage payment a year, the city would be doing that every month. So this way, at the same time, they'd have a lower mortgage payment, but still pay that $93 million that they don't have to, but it'll help with the principle of the actual bond. So that those financial governance help with this conversation. Another thing we're talking about is also putting it to the voters at the, having them have their say. My council colleagues are going to be here next term. At the end of the day, whether you address this problem today, tomorrow, you will still have this problem next term, the year after that, and if you go for another term, it's not going away for you. You will always have this conundrum. You will always have this financial problem and burden. So I ask all of you to have an open mind. I know this is new to all of you. A lot of you are new to the council, new to this whole concept. I appreciate some of the council members who a lot of them taking the initiative to kind of educate themselves on it and kind of really understand what it is, because they realize that this burden is today and they potentially can mitigate it tomorrow because they know they're going to have the same problem when they get reelected next term. So ask all of you to have that open mind. It's a good proposal, and I hope the legislators and the people listening have an open mind and listen to this. I know it's the end, it's the last year of the term, and saying, well, is this something we should be doing now? The most important, the issue why this is so imperative is because the interest rates are so low. And that's the only reason why it makes any sense. If this was a few years ago when interest rates are high, I don't think anybody would be talking about this. But because as a lot of you have done, you've either bought a new home or refinance your existing home because the interest rates are so low. Well, this would be the city doing the same thing, refinancing a horrible mortgage and trying to create a stabilized payment that they can pay for the next 25 years. That's generally what it's about. I'll also let the record reflect that Councilman Oscar Vargas is present. So I ask everybody to listen to the presenters. I know it's going to have hopefully have a rousing discussion. The next steps, of course, go to the State House. Also, the Finance Committee will be hearing it. So there's going to be a process with the council, numerous junctions. We'll have an opportunity to weigh in, get educated, and state their concerns up and down, as well as eventually to the voting public. So with that, thank you all again for attending and listening to the presentation I forwarded to you folks. And I'm going to ask the next person, of course, which is Mayor Alorza, who is helped leading this charge. And I also want to thank her, by the way, willing to take this on and try this again. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we all agree with all the politics we all have, but when there's a common cause that promotes a common good for the city and its financial health, we should all consider to rally around and try to support, if you agree with this initiative. Mayor, you have the mic, and welcome again.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to all my colleagues in office. It's great to be here with you. Thank you for holding this special session. I want to begin by thanking Council President Igliozzi. We've had several conversations about this over time, and he's always been a great and strong partner. And the recommendations that we'll be presenting today, this is the result of a working group that was put together by both of us. So thank you to Council President and all of my colleagues and City Council for your work on this. I also especially want to recognize our co-chairs. Mike DeBiase from RIPAC, Laurie White from the Chamber, and Cliff Wood from the Providence Foundation. Thank you for stepping up and leading in this way. I know that you've always been very interested and very concerned with the city's finances, and the process that we went through and the recommendations that were made, I think put us in much stronger position. So, I want to begin by just acknowledging that when we put together this working group, we were intentional about filling this working group with people with different perspectives, and we were also intentional in appointing people to the group who had expressed skepticism, and in some sense were even outright critical of the proposal that we put forward last year. And I think it's very meaningful that there are several folks who started off as skeptics and ended up not only being supportive, but making these recommendations to go forward with a pension obligation bond, plus a set of other recommendations that are contained in the report. And if I may, I believe that what has helped move people is first and foremost some significant substantive changes that were made to the recommendations that are made, such as lowering it from 700 million to 500 million. Many of these, as the Council President mentioned, requiring voter approval, which is really important. We heard that feedback loud and clear. Not taking savings in the early years, and also providing safeguards so that in future years, as our finances would improve, that future administrations wouldn't be able to add to the unfunded liability. And so those recommendations make this, what I believe, an even stronger proposal than was put forward last year. I think that's one key point that helped move people who are skeptics to being supportive. But I also believe that with the conversations that we had as part of this working group, a conversation that was extremely helpful to all of us was the legal conversation that we had. In a certain sense, I know this is a complicated topic, but at the end of the day, the numbers don't lie, and the numbers are pretty straightforward. What I believe added a lot to the conversation was an assessment of the Supreme Court opinion and how that essentially ties our hands and limits our options. There are a lot of things that we would like to do, but unfortunately, many of those options just aren't available to us to take advantage of. And so given the very narrow and limited set of options that we have, along with the very real risk of doing nothing, that's how we as a group, I believe, arrived at this point of making these recommendations for moving forward. And so there are a lot of reasons that explain how we got here. And I think that many of us are well aware of that. But our task is figuring out what's the best way to get out of here. And so the fundamental challenge that we have is that as it currently stands, our pension payments are projected to rise at about 5 to 5.5% per year, whereas our revenue is projected to rise only about 2.1% a year. So therein lies a challenge. The longer we go without solving this, the more we're going to edge closer and closer to a new fiscal cliff. So this proposal, what the recommendations do is it fixes that fundamental problem. And so with a pension obligation bond of $500 million, it makes it so that our pension payments rise 2% each year, exactly in line with our projected revenue forecasts, so that we can absorb those increases and make it so that it's sustainable within our budget into the future. So I'll pause there, and I'll hand it off to folks who will go into all of this in great detail. But I want to end at the same point, at the same place where Council President did. I ask everyone to please approach this with an open mind. Ask every which question that you have, and we will do our best, not just as an administration, but as a working group and as an entire body, to answer them as honestly and as fully and comprehensively as we can. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll hand it back to you, Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. Next, actually, my former colleague, former councilman, and now the director of the Providence Foundation, Cliff Wood. Cliff,
Thank
you
you.
have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Council President and City and Council at large for this opportunity. I want to thank especially, beside the Council President, Councilman Espinal and Councilwoman Anthony for the participation. And of course, thanks to the Mayor and his office and Finance Department for their diligence throughout this whole process. The Providence Foundation has been committed to improving the city's finances, and in particular, finding a solution to the unfunded pension liability for decades, as John mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. Our board of directors was very enthusiastic about our partnering with our friends and colleagues at RIPEC and at the Chamber of Commerce to help put this working group together. And so we thank you for that opportunity. I also want to thank my deputy director, Nick Freeman, for his diligence and his intelligence and assistance throughout the whole process. This was a collaborative and a consensus building effort. We looked at many different options, many different remedies, a lot of back and forth. As the mayor mentioned, a lot of people who were skeptical and moved one way and the next. For 6 months, a lot of hard work, a lot of serious work and analysis, deliberation, not only from members of the group, but from outside stakeholders and financial experts, other council members, members of the General Assembly, Governor's Office, Senate staff. So this was taken very seriously. And I think we've come up with some good recommendations, well worth consideration. I'll leave those presentations to the experts, but I do think this is a very serious document. And I'm very glad that we have this opportunity to vet it publicly like we are today. As the mayor mentioned, and as Council President Igliosi mentioned, there's no perfect solution for this. There's no solution without any risk. But of course, there's a very, very big risk in doing nothing. This pension liability, it's going nowhere without being addressed. So that's critical to remember. And as I mentioned, no one idea will be enough. But we've developed this package that I think is very worthy of a public consideration and conversation, and looking forward to being part of that conversation, not only today, but going forward. So thank you very much for this opportunity on behalf of the foundation.
Thank you, Director Wood. Next, we have the president of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, Laurie White. Is she, Madam Clerk? Is Ms. White available? Okay, well, do you say, okay, we'll get back. Next, we have someone's a well-respected individual. Also, we have the CEO, Michael DiBiase of the Rhode Island Public Expenditure Council President. Mr. DiBiase, sir, you have the mic. Madam Clerk, can you? Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you to the mayor, and thank you to my co-chairs, Cliffwood and Laurie White. And it's great to see council members and friendly faces from the Senate and the House. RIPEC is very interested in the financial challenges of Providence. We believe those challenges are the most serious fiscal issues that the state faces, not just the city, but the state faces. And so we're very pleased to be engaged. Can people hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I can. Colleagues and folks, can you hear them?
We could just a little louder.
Okay, let me see.
Can you do a little louder?
Is that better? Maybe is that better?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. So, I probably have the most explaining to do because I appeared before many of you talking about the concerns over the pension obligation bond several months ago. The fact of the matter is that historically, pension obligation bonds have been disfavored. If you had a well-funded, well-functioning pension system, you probably wouldn't be looking into pension obligation bonds. But I decided to support this smaller $500 million pension obligation bond for a number of reasons. And I don't do that likely because, as the report says, the bond is still carries some investment risk. However, when the interest rate is low, as it is now, the borrowing rate is low, there is less risk on these pension obligation bonds. And we did have some recommendations here where the investment advisors would invest over time to try to avoid that market timing risk, which is the bigger one, but there's still risk. I think the most persuasive thing for me is that the city has very limited options. You do have this growing pension obligation growing fast in the budget. So it's not an emergency, but within a few years, you're going to have to do something about it. It's just not sustainable. The liability in the pension fund, which I think is about 1.3 billion, is mostly, if not almost entirely, due to retirees. So changes in the current active employees' benefits is not really going to address much of this problem. The Superior Court decisions make it very difficult, if not impossible, to make changes in these retiree benefits, which is the root of the problem. The report talks about a bankruptcy is not an option. A lot of people, myself included, have talked about soft bankruptcy as a way to somehow get out of these liabilities owed to these retirees. But we learned through our process that that's just not that viable. And the fact that the city is paying its bills and is not insolvent. You're going to hear a criticism that by doing this, you're going to take the pressure off of getting more concessions from employees. So, that I think is true to some degree, right? Because now the pension is going to be funded 60% immediately. But I'll say a few things about that. First of all, the city, through collective bargaining, has recently obtained very large concessions from police and fire, which those are the employee groups that are putting the most pressure, and from my understanding, on the pension system. There were large increases over time in contributions. And there's still a very large OPEB liability out there. So, I mean, that's $1 billion. So if you want to talk about, pressure, at some point, the city's going to have to do something about that and talk to the employees about some reforms and the health benefit side. I think the fact that the city will maintain and increase its annual level contribution was very important to me. I just did not think it was reasonable to reduce that contribution, and voter approval is important as well. And then just to conclude, this pension obligation bond and this plan, which includes the re-amortization as well, doesn't solve the pension funding issue. And the report talks about that we need to continue to work on benefit reforms, and there are still some benefit reforms out there that should be pursued. This report, I'm disappointed, but understand, does not really address the OPEB situation in a concrete way. There are recommendations, which I hope come to pass, where perhaps the OPEB fund could start getting funded, creating a fund. And the other that this does not do is there's a number of other financial challenges facing the city that's kind of beyond the scope of this working group. And I hope that RIPEC is able to continue to work on these issues with people from the city and my colleagues, because I do think there's a number of other issues. The pension is the biggest thing, and it kind of dominates the conversation, but there are a lot of other issues worth talking about. So sorry they took some extra time, but I appreciate very much being part of this process. And without doing this pension obligation bond, you would re-amortize the pension, which would kind of kick the can down the road. You wouldn't really improve your situation. So you're taking a risk here, but I think given kind of the difficult situation the city's in, it's a risk worth taking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DiBiase. Next, we have some remarks from our pension working group council designees. We have Council President Pro Tem Pedro Espinal. President Pro Tem, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that is here tonight and to my colleagues on the pension group. I'd like to thank, first of all, the mayor for being the leader on this. Thank you, Mayor Loza, as well as the co-chairs for taking on this huge, tremendous task and the advices and the service that we had. And to my council colleagues, thank you so much. This is critical. This is so important to us and to our fiscal health of our city. So I'm extremely grateful to have been given the opportunity to participate in this. Throughout the weeks and months that we spent on this, we took a very in-depth look into our pension system, our pension structure, and we got an opportunity to look at what got us here. You know, we learned that bad decisions in the past that was not sustainable is actually what got us here. And we also look at the current scenario. As was mentioned before, you know, the system that we have right now is not sustainable. And we also know that bankruptcy is not an option. So, but we also had an opportunity to look in depth and what the future holds for us. And we were given an opportunity to look at different scenarios. If you remember, we started out with 704 million. Then we looked at $300 million, but we settled on 500. We felt that this amount would align the expenditure growth with the revenue growth, and that would actually get us out of the critical status that we're in by 2029. So this report is in depth. It looks very different scenario. It gives us an opportunity to look at what we have in front of us, and so much work from so many experts went into this. That when we read through it, you look at really what we have in front of us, and you will see that going this route might be the best way that we could do at this point. There are safety nets that were put in place to protect us and guide us that we can refer to. And as we review this report, I believe Mr. Seth Williams will be doing that for us. You will find that I fully support this decision if we end up going this way, because it actually takes many things into considerations, and I feel that it'll put us in better financial footings, and it protects us at the same time. So I'm looking forward to review the report with all my colleagues, and looking forward to send it up to the State House and see if we can get the okay to move on this. It's gonna go to the voters if we reach that point, and hopefully we can get it through. So thank you so much.
Thank you, President Tim Espinal. Next, we have Councilwoman Helen Anthony. Councilwoman, you have the mic.
Thank you. I won't repeat what's been said by the presenters thus far, but I would like to thank the mayor very much for leading this charge, and the co-chairs who have been wonderful leaders, and Mr. DiBiase and Senator Zurier in particular have been, and Nick Freeman have been really pulling hard on this committee. I have to say that I certainly am one of the people that was expressing a lot of skepticism when the POB was first presented, and I am a convert. now. I have to say that because of the substantial changes that have already been spoken to about lowering the amount to 500 million, requiring voter approval, not taking savings in the early years, and the guardrails for how this will be handled in the future, I think really reduce the risk. There's going to be risk associated with it, no question about it. But I think that it's worth the risk because our options are limited. We have talked about this so often. People talk about selling the property we have. We've talked about monetizing the Providence Water Supply Board. There's been many discussions that have happened since I've been on council, and these just aren't going anywhere. And so we have to do something. And I think there are some other things that Mr. DBA certainly talked about that can be done in the future regarding OPEB and other things that we should continue doing and also in terms of making sure the contracts, we have appropriate contributions that our current employees are making. There are things we can do in the future, but I think this will take us out of the critical status. So I am a convert, as I said. I hope that other people will see their way clear to supporting this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Anthony. Yes, hang on a second. Let the record reflect, by the way, that Councilman Fortune is present. Next, we have Seth Williams, who's the Director of Management and Budget Consulting from PFM Group Consultings, LLC. Mr. Williams, you have the mic, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, Council President. It's good to be with all of you this evening, and thank you for the time. If it's okay with everybody, I will share my screen so that we can all look at the same thing at the same time, and I'm going to walk through the executive summary. And appreciate the opportunity, and I'm sure there will be discussion, and to the extent possible, I think city staff, city finance team, and other financial experts, including myself, will be available for questions as appropriate. So again, thank you for the time. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and hopefully that should be showing up right about now for you all. Just a quick thumbs up if everybody can see it. Everybody's got it? Okay. So a lot of this ground has been covered in the opening remarks by all of the folks who've had the chance to speak so far. But I want to try to put a little bit of context around all of this with some of the history, and then walk through some of the summary of findings and then the recommendations that arose out of the work group. I had the privilege and opportunity to help facilitate the work group and some of its recommendations. These recommendations are not mine or PFM's. These are certainly the work of the work group, and they deserve the credit, and all of the co-chairs and certainly the mayor and council president should be credited with tackling something that's both this daunting but this long in the making. And the city's challenges from a pension standpoint really date back more than three decades, rooted in decisions that were made long ago to increase benefits to folks who would obviously then go on to retire, but those promises were never funded in a commensurate manner. And so they were both unsustainable when they were awarded, but then further compounded by not being funded even once those promises were made. And so fast forward over 30 years later, that compounding impact drives the majority of the city's unfunded liability. That unfunded liability has grown to such a point that the city is an outlier. It is among the worst funded pension, it has among the worst funded pension plans in the nation. Over that time, over that same 30-year period, the city's unfunded pension liability increased by over $1 billion. And that's in just straight cash dollars. That does not include the things like inflation or other compounding effects, which make it probably more sizable. But in straight dollar value, the increase in the city's unfunded liability is increased by $1 billion. The council president and the mayor touched on this, among others. The unfunded liability associated largely with the retirees is a clear and present danger to the city's long-term financial structure. Mr. DeViese touched on the fact that there are OPEB liabilities that exist as well, and that's another $1 billion plus liability that is looming. But the acuteness and the near-term pressures that are presented by the pension system dictate that these likely need to be tackled a lot sooner than some of the other fiscal challenges that the city may face. To put a fine point on it, with a pension system that's approximately 22% funded, it equates to about $8,500 per resident. That's not just adult residents, that's children. That's every single person that resides in Providence. It's about $8,500 per person. That will continue to grow. Of that $8,500, about $6,600 is unfunded on a per capita basis, which means that debt resides with every single resident of Providence and over every single decision that the city will make going forward. You heard the mayor speak about this and the council president speak about it fairly passionately. The rate of that increase with the pension liability is going to crowd out other city spending priorities, whether that be education, whether that be public safety, whether that be housing, whether that be tax rate sustainability and affordability, whether that be infrastructure investment, economic development, community development, all of the other priorities the city wants to spend on will inevitably be constrained if no action is taken. As the pension fund grows at about 5%, but city revenues grow only at about 2%, that gulf that opens up will continue to compound and erode the city's economic competitiveness and thereby affect the state's competitiveness. Providence is, by general sense, I think the work group reached an accord that Providence is a straw that stirs the drink of the city of the state of Rhode Island, and as a result, any impacts fiscally that is, or any negative impact fiscally that hampers Providence's ability to serve as an economic engine within the state of Rhode Island, thereby is a significant concern or issue for the state. Numerous other folks have touched on the fact that much of the liability, again, resides with the retirees. But I want to put a kind of fine point on that. The city has made incremental reforms, and incremental probably actually undersells the reforms that the city has been able to achieve both on pension and on OPEB in recent years. That's progress, and that's meaningful progress, but it's insufficient to deal with the unfunded liability that resides with the retirees. Some folks have suggested, and it was a topic of discussion of the work group, what about if the city moves towards a pension system that looks a little bit more like what the state of Rhode Island did? And those reforms, which were important and played a very critical role in the state's future, dealt with a series of challenges that were different than what the city of Providence faces. And so the solutions look different. In Providence, those same reforms wouldn't have the fiscal impact that they did for the state of Rhode Island because the liability resides in Providence with the retirees as opposed to the Actons. Additionally, because of some of the, or not some of, the very clear limitations on the city's ability to tackle this growing issue, there are limited options. And so the need for the city to deal with the pension crisis that it faces it can only do so with the solutions that are available to it. And so as the working group worked through this, it really spent some time, and I think you heard the co-chairs and Mr. DeBiase in particular speak about the Supreme Court decisions that limit the city's authority and make it fairly impractical, if not impossible, to enact pension reforms for retirees, again, where the liability in Providence resides. And that because that cohort drives the unfunded liability, there's a need to think about this challenge from a different standpoint. And doing nothing isn't an option because we know the path that goes on. And the work group spoke fairly eloquently and fairly passionately about the unacceptability of doing nothing. But standing pat, standing in a status quo position does not deliver the results that Providence needs, and it doesn't deliver the results that Providence requires. So with that, the work group spent time looking and thinking about the recommendations that can help Providence face down the significant unfunded liability and provide a pathway forward with the limited options that are under its control or under its control with the assent of others, whether that be the state, voters, or as the work group recommends, both. The first recommendation you heard various co-chairs speak to is that bankruptcy is not an option. Bankruptcy is a last resort when communities cannot pay their bills, when all other options have been exhausted. Providence is not in that case. Providence has been able to pay down historical deficits. It's seen its bond rating increase. It has balanced its budgets, created surpluses, built its rainy day fund, built its fund balance, maintained tax rates to stability, and done so all throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. That is not a sign of a community that is on the brink of bankruptcy. Above and beyond that, the pain that comes with bankruptcy is often ignored. There would be significant limitations on the city's authority to make its own decisions. There would be significant and lasting fiscal pain. And so in all aspects, the work group was very clear. Bankruptcy is not an option and will not be an option for Providence so long as it has the opportunity to control its own destiny. As a result, within the limited options that Providence has at its disposal, the work group recommended that the city should request state legislative and voter authorization to issue a pension obligation bond that deposits approximately $500 million into the pension system. I should note, and various co-chairs, I think, underline this point, that recommendation was not made lightly. There was healthy debate, there was healthy discussion, and there was healthy review of various options that were considered, along with the recommendation to authorize a $500 million deposit in the ERS. The work group identified a series of guardrails. You heard Councilwoman Anthony speak to paying at least as much as the city pays now for its pension system. You heard the mayor speak about putting in place policies that prevent future councils and administrations from repeating sins of the past. And the series of guardrails that are discussed in the report and the work group walked through in a comprehensive way is meant to put forward a policy platform that ensures that the city can be both prudent in the near term and that it's not issuing a pension obligation bond just for the sake of it. It's doing so only if, underscore that, only if certain conditions are met and the benefit outweighs the risk. And over the long term as well, to ensure that the city is able to make the payments on its debt service, make its payments for its normal cost portion of the pension system annual obligations, and do so in a way that's commensurate with with the city's growth in its revenues. The work group reviewed 3 different sizes of pension obligation bonds, a $300 million, $500 million, a $700 million offering. The $500 million deposit was deemed to be the best match for the city's opportunities and needs related to its unfunded pension obligation. And that's principally because it balances the risk, but it also balances the need of the city to match its recurring revenue with its recurring expenditures, inclusive of any of the debt and pension-related costs associated with a pension obligation bond. And so the $500 million deposit became the recommendation of the working group. And the full report, which is available in subsequent pages from the executive summary, provides a very good detail of what such a transaction would look like. Mr. DeViese touched on the fact that the city should view this, and the broader Providence community should view this as one big step, but not a final step in grappling with the city's pension challenges. Additional actions are necessary to balance taxpayer and retiree benefits and needs from the pension system so that retirees can have a surety that they will have a dignified retirement, but taxpayers can also have a surety that they can live and work in a place like Providence that's affordable, that provides basic city services in a meaningful and robust manner, and that it's a great place and continues to be a great place to live, work, and play. The work group walks through a series of those future reforms to manage expenditures in a way that help the city both increase its non-tax revenue, but also manage its liabilities. And that deals with things not only pension related, but also OPEB related. Finally, the work group reviewed some of the city's fiscal progress in recent years. And the city has made meaningful progress and has some strong, very strong fiscal policies that have kind of been informally adopted. And so the work group walked through, and this is some of the guardrail discussion for future councils and future administrations to really lock in what the city's best practice policies are, that it's taken action, that have helped to write the annual budget in a more sustainable and affordable way, but to lock those in as the city of Providence's actions and formal policies on a go-forward basis. Specifically around expenditure, matching expenditures to annual revenue growth, but also options to lock in recurring revenues from those non-tax-based areas. So as a whole, the work group spent significant time, I think, provided very thoughtful recommendations and lay out a comprehensive approach. And so would be happy to turn it back to you, Council President, and appreciate the time to provide a quick summary of the work group's report and look forward to a robust and healthy discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can I see the big board so I can see?
Stop sharing.
Yep, please stop sharing. So first, council members, do you have any questions at this time? Or comments? Would you please raise your hand? Councilwoman Ryan, you have the mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Council President. Thank you to all that have made presentations this evening. I would be remiss if I didn't thank the mayor. When this matter was heard in the Finance Committee, we had a number of questions. We sent you away and we asked you to help us answer those questions so that we could wrap our arms around the risk of this financial instrument. And I give you great credit this deep dive into the analysis of the risks associated with this bond is a great exercise. And to your credit, you did lead that and have really addressed many of the issues that were raised along the way. Again, thank the committee members as well for your hard work and due diligence on this. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the council president's efforts on this topic. When it first emerged and we heard it in finance, he was the first to say it's risky, we need more information, and we need guardrails. And I heard him from day one say, if we do it, we need to maintain the payment that we're making right now, the $93 million pension payment, and be diligent about making sure that we exercise every opportunity to find other reforms. So I'm impressed. I'm impressed with the work that's been done. I'm very impressed with a thoughtful review. I look forward to hearing this further in the Finance Committee. I've had many discussions with just about everybody that has presented tonight, I look forward. This is a great work product and a great collaborative effort. I'm thrilled to see that we moved off the 700 million. I never thought that was a good size. So moving to 500 seems right. It seems like it's been right sized through the work of this committee. Again, thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing it in committee. Thank you, Council President, for the time.
Any Councilman Ryan? Any council members? Any comments or questions at this time? Councilman Duncalves?
Thank you so much, Mr. President. First and foremost, I want to thank Michael DBAS, Laurie White, and Cliff Wood for your important work. The mayor, my council colleagues, thank you for your leadership, particularly the mayor and the council president. Seth, thank you for that robust presentation as well. We clearly have a Herculean task before us, as everyone so eloquently articulated. And I just have a couple of questions here. What can we do to ensure that the state authorization is palatable for some of our state colleagues who are concerned about the risks? And that's more of a broad question for some of our elected officials here, but anyone who thinks they would be suited to answer that question.
Councilman Duncalves, right now the questions would actually go to the folks that presented. This is not a public hearing. So if mayor or someone from the panel who spoke, if they want to answer that, we can. But when this goes to committee after this meeting, we can then the committee chair and that can have that interaction. It's not that type of meeting right now. Actually, it's not posted as such, so I can't do that. Does mayor or somebody want to answer that, or do you want to wait to at the finance committee? I'll defer to you, mayor and his staff.
I think you're right, Council President. I think it takes some collective strategizing among all of us to answer that question.
Great. So I certainly look forward to that discussion, and just want to thank everyone for all their due diligence and hard work on this process.
Thank you, Councilman Duncalves. Councilwoman Miller, you have the mic.
Thank you, Council President. And I, of course, echo the thanks of all of us, to the mayor, to the working group, to my colleagues on council who served on it, and folks not in elected office. Really, thank you for taking the time to do this. I just have one question relative to the bond, and that is, did the working group consider, consider mitigating risk by taking out multiple bonds, right? Instead of one big bite of the apple, did the working group consider multiple bonds over a period of time as a strategy? That's primarily my question. Everything else I look forward to discussing in finance.
Councilor Miller, Mayor, Mr. Mancini, who would like to answer that question? I'll defer the mayor to direct it. Mayor?
Maybe Seth. Maybe Seth.
Mr. Williams, would you like to answer that question, sir?
Sure. I can answer it in so much as what the working group spoke to. In terms of strategic standpoint, I think the city should have its formal financial advisors weigh in on that. And that may be a great opportunity as part of the Finance Committee discussion. The working group did briefly review some of those options, but it was not an option reviewed in depth. And my recollection, and Larry or Mayor, please correct me if you have a different recollection, but the impact of the compounding interest is a significant component of the pension obligation bond strategy, that the ability to deposit and then compound the interest on the principal over time generates a significant amount of projected revenue to the pension system, that if it were done in tranches over a multi-year or even over a multi-decade period, the interest, the compounding interest of those transactions, of the initial lump sum transaction, would be lost because it would be spread out over a larger period of time, and thus would not quite have as sizable a benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Councilman Miller? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, Council President.
Mayor?
So we also discussed the investment timing and the risk. You could put it all in and then the next day it tanks. I believe Michael DeBiase mentioned this during his comments, that whether it came out as a full recommendation or not, I don't recall. But as we go through the next steps in this, if we come back to the city council and the city authorizes it after the general assembly, after voter approval, it still has to come before the city council. We have an opportunity to shape it in different ways. And I think that we're all interested in exploring sort of the timing and the sequencing of when we put it into the pension fund.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments or questions by council members at this time? Councilman Oscar Vargas, Councilman.
Thank you to everyone to be here and this big step about money. It's a big investment, $500 million. The question will be for Mr. DeVias, Mr. Michael. How big is the risk that we're going to take by investing $500 million into the stock market? Do we have a safety net or something? What happens if the market crash?
So I'm probably not the best to answer that. There's probably financial advisors, but it's what's done is there's usually scenarios that have different pressure testing of these kind of doomsday scenarios or bad scenarios that involve sharp corrections of the market. I think the discussion we were just having about, and I thought that was a very good question, Councilperson Miller, about, you take out the bond and you deposit it in the pension fund, but then the question is, because you want to take advantage of the low interest rates, but then the question is, how do you time your investment in those parts of the stock market that is most risky, usually the equities, and do you do that over a phased process? Because that way you can perhaps mitigate your risk a bit. The other side is if you postpone that, those could be some of the most successful investments. So but I do think the finance professionals will give you those scenarios. What's the chance of actually going negative, and then if you go negative, how big will that hole be? And I think we looked at that and felt that this was a manageable risk. You have to ask yourself, what's the chances of losing money, and then if we do lose money, what's the total downside risk? It's not it's not 500 million. It's some other number. So I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman, did you want to weigh in that question, sir, or did you have a question?
I was going to try to add to what Mr. DBA said, if that's allowed, Council President.
Please do.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say, to Councilman Vargas's question. It's a very good question. It's an important question that we need to think about before moving forward with any of this. I would just point out that we're talking about a 25-year pension obligation bond that would then need to surpass a very low between, say, 3.5% and 4% interest rate. Over the last 25 years, the city of Providence's pension system has had an average annual return of about 7.6%. So much higher than the interest rate we're talking about needing to beat. And in the last 25 years, that's a time period that included 3 separate recessions, 2 of which were described by some of the greatest financial minds out there as once in a lifetime recessions. If we were able to beat that type of an interest rate over the last 25 years, I think that while there is risk, we can feel fairly confident that the next 25 years we'll be able to beat it as well.
And Mr. Chairman, any other comments or questions by council members? Okay. I just want to just add a couple of thoughts. Just one, I just want to mention that I think the mayor is correct. I mean, if we do go down this road and we do get permission and the voter says yes, the voting population, the legislature allows us, this conversation is relevant, more relevant today than maybe a year from now. If interest rates change dramatically and go up, this may not be an advantageous avenue. So that's why we're at this point. So I think people have to realize that if things get really bad a year from now, even if we get permission all the way through, if interest rates are above 4 and 5 and 6, this probably will not be something we'll be utilizing. So that, unfortunately, it's not what's driving this is also the idea that you have good interest rates. The second thing I want to mention to Mr. Vargas is I actually have been very fortunate because I was actually a board investment commissioner for many years. And one of the things I actually did way back when as a freshman councilman was wrench control of the investment portfolio from that time, the retirement board and the unions, and put it into the hands of a legitimate professional investment firm. And they have done a remarkable job. And just to give a little sense, when I first came onto the council way back when, we had about $300 million in our pension account at that time. 2022, we're up to almost 400 million. And I have lived through those recessions he's mentioned. And you said, what's the risk? The risk is America. Do you believe in the American market or you don't? It really comes down to that. And not only if we lose, if you feel you may lose that 500 million, well, we'll also lose the other 400 million. So it's, and I've been there, where the market, and sure remembers the credit default market and the real estate fallout. We dramatically lost a lot of money in the pension system, but then it all came back in plus. So it's, what do you believe in the American market, and will it be healthy and sustainable the next 25 years? To my colleagues and people listening, I believe it is, and I believe it will. I believe America will be here 25 years from now. I believe America will be healthy and strong 25 years from now. And there'll be up and downs in the markets, but if we maintain a professional investment firm like we have in the past 20, 30 years, and we do that in the future and continue with that, we should hopefully, and I think, and I'm not an investment person, but I feel confident that we will maintain a healthy system the best we can, and it will benefit on the ups of the American market. So that's where you are. So it's not like we're saying we're looking to invest into a strip mall or to buy into like some type of, restaurant franchise. We're investing in America, investing in the market. And I'm sure everybody on this phone, everybody on this call has maybe some form of fashion, some type of investment structure, pension, et cetera, in the American market. So if you believe American market will help you, believe it will help the whole city. So if that helps, that's just been my personal experience in my years. Are there any other comments or questions by council members? I also see, I guess, Ms. White has joined us. I'll give her an opportunity to speak real quick, if that's okay. So we have, once again, we're very lucky. We have the president, Laurie White, of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. Ms. White, you have the mic.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I apologize for the delay. I was speaking to some nursing students at the University of Rhode Island who are receiving their white coats as part of their white coat ceremony. On behalf of the chamber, I'd like to express our appreciation to Mayor Elorza and the members of the Providence City Council for hosting tonight's session and also for being open and receptive to the work of this committee. I will say that over the course of the last 6 or 7 months, the team that the mayor and the council put together has been first rate in truly understanding and trying to think through the ramifications of the tremendous unstable financial underpinnings of the pension system, and to think of and to explore concepts for perhaps remedying that in the form of a pension obligation bond. My interest and the interests of the members of the Greater Providence Chamber is that we are very concerned that the capital city is, you know, as the capital city goes, so goes the state. And we need a very strong, stable, financially stable capital city in order to continue to attract investment to Rhode Island, in order to keep our college students here, and in order to continue to offer opportunities for jobs and career mobility. So our next generation of Providence residents is looking to all of us to be able to put the city on a trajectory where it is sustainable. There are many risks out there in terms of systemic risks as a society. So we, you know, in recent months, we've talked at great length and evaluated many of the risks associated with A, doing nothing, and B, pursuing such options as the pension obligation bond. There's nothing to put forth that is risk-free. And as the council president was just referring to, this is the faith in the financial systems, and being able to think at this moment in time when we do have unprecedented low rates and potentially, the ability to go into the market with an offering that would help the pension system be able to be in a long-term sustainable mode. So lots of options were considered, great in-depth analysis and perspective put forth by the various subject matter experts, a lot of interesting and very profound and good questions from the members of the panel and my colleagues who really pressed hard to challenge our own assumptions. So here we are today, and I think I speak for my fellow chairs to say that we have an opportunity to chart a new path forward for the city. The cost of doing nothing, kicking the can down the road and thinking that things are going to change, has perilous consequences in and of itself. We would like to thank the mayor for his leadership on this issue, and I would hope that this concept will continue to be explored in a way that creates a favorable outcome and helps the next generation of Providence residents and those that care about the city of Providence to be able to be in a place where there's good opportunity for all. So thank you for affording me this opportunity to say a few words on behalf of the business community.
Thank you, Ms. White. Any other comments or questions by council members? Okay, with that, I'm going to refer this, the pension report working group, to the finance committee. Madam Clerk, duly noted. All right, I ask everybody to think thoughtful and think Providence tonight, and thank you all for attending and participating. I know we're going to have continual conversations and discussions. We're counting on the finance committee to continue that process, as well as the mayor, his team, and everybody involved, and of course our reps and senators and people joining us. I thank you personally for listening. Hopefully, we can raise your level of comfort and hopefully may get some guidance and support and ideas from all of you. Thank you for attending.
Mr. President.
Oh, yep. This is not a public hearing. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to make a recommendation. we have our meetings on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Mondays would
Oh.
be much better for us. That's all I'm gonna say. Thank
Okay,
you.
all I'm saying, I thank you, thank you. Yep, that, and with any other council questions, that a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Representative Lombardo.
Motion to adjourn,
Motion to
Mr.
adjourn
President.
by Majority Leader Taylor, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by, Councilman Castillo. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Be well and be safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
So this gets referred to this Finance Committee. Huh?